We need to take a really hard look at a feeling you're probably incredibly familiar with. It's that sinking realization at the end of the month where you check your bank account and think, wait, I make good money, so why do I feel so broke? And I want to start off right now by just validating that feeling for you. That financial dread, that constant squeeze you're feeling, it's absolutely real, and it is backed up by decades of hard macroeconomic data. It's exactly why you'll never feel rich, even if you earn more. So, we have to ask the core question here. Why does earning more feel like having less? To answer this, we're not going to sit here and nitpick your personal budgeting skills. Instead, we are going to dive into the systemic, historical, and macroeconomic data to uncover exactly how the economy has fundamentally shifted right beneath our feet over the last several decades. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to break down this anxiety into 5 logical systemic factors. We'll start with the great wage decoupling, move into the cost of living crush and the two-income trap, then zoom out to see how wealth beats work, and finally, we'll look at how people are surviving through the shadow debt danger. Let's get right into it. Section 1, the great wage decoupling. To really understand where we are today, we have to look back at the historical relationship between the growth of the overall economy and the size of the everyday worker's paycheck. The Economic Policy Institute has some fascinating data on this. During the post-war period, basically from 1948 to 1979, there was an almost one-to-one relationship between economic growth and worker prosperity. Productivity went up 108.1%, and compensation followed right alongside it at 93.2%. It made sense, right? You work harder, the economy grows, you get paid more. But then, things change. From 1979 to 2025, productivity rose another 90.2%, but worker compensation, it only increased by 33%. This right here is what economists call the great decoupling. The historical, reliable link between the output of the economy and your median wage was just fundamentally broken. Now, this stagnation wasn't just some random accident. It was a massive convergence of systemic shifts. Research points to several very distinct causes. First, you had massive technological change and automation that displaced a lot of labor functions. Then, we saw the rapid expansion of global trade and supply chains. And at the exact same time, policies emphasizing deregulation and corporate tax cuts completely reshaped the business landscape. Add in a dramatic reduction in collective bargaining and union density, and well, the leverage just completely shifted away from the individual worker. So the economy kept growing, absolutely, but those gains just stopped showing up in your paycheck. Section 2, the cost of living crush. Okay, so let's see how all this builds into the immediate, highly tangible pain points you're experiencing every single day in your household budget. 7.12. This is a staggering number. According to long-term trends data, this represents the current U.S. home price to median household income ratio. Historically, a home in the U.S. cost about 5 times the yearly median household income. Today, it costs more than 7 times the median annual income. To really put that into perspective, even during the absolute peak of the 2006 housing bubble, this ratio had just barely crossed over that 7 mark. And the crazy thing is, it's not just housing. Based on findings from the OECD, the essential pillars of a middle-class lifestyle are exponentially outpacing both median income and general inflation. Over the last 2 decades, housing prices in large cities have grown 3 times faster than household median income. Healthcare costs have absolutely surged, driven by aging populations and expensive new technologies. And education, a literal prerequisite for landing a job to afford all these things, the cost have skyrocketed. The things you actually need to survive and advance are just getting further and further out of reach. It's a massive squeeze. Section 3, the two-income trap. Because of this overwhelming crush, the modern family structure was basically forced to adapt. Researchers Elizabeth Warren and Amelia Warren-Tyagi uncovered something truly unsettling in their extensive research into personal bankruptcy. They concluded, having children is the single best predictor that a woman will go bankrupt. Let that sink in for a second. It's a heavy, powerful insight that underscores just how precarious the financial reality of raising a family in today's economy really is. And this data, it completely obliterates the overconsumption myth. So yes, your avocado toast and your daily coffees are officially off the hook. The reality of the situation is that even with 2 incomes, massive fixed costs like childcare, real estate in areas with decent public schools, and health coverage, they eat up all the cash flow. In fact, dual-income households today actually have less discretionary money left over than single-income households did a generation ago. You aren't going broke because you're spending too much on fun. You're going broke just trying to pay for the absolute basics. Section 4, how wealth beats work. All right, now we need to zoom out a bit to some heavy-hitting macroeconomic theories that explain exactly why the system inherently favors capital over labor. We have to talk about French economist Thomas Piketty's landmark research. He uses this deceptively simple equation: R is greater than G. It's actually a foundational mechanism of capitalism. It means that the rate of return on capital, that's the R, which includes wealth, stocks, real estate, almost always exceeds the rate of global economic growth, which is the G. Simply put, wealth inherently grows faster than the economy itself. And this plays out in a deeply structural way that connects right back to that exact feeling of never getting ahead. Piketty's data shows the global rate of return for the average adult was just 2.1%. Meanwhile, billionaires, they saw returns over 6.5%. The more wealth a person or an institution already owns, the faster that wealth multiplies. If you are relying strictly on wages for your income, it is mathematically impossible to keep pace with those who generate their income simply by owning assets. Compounding this whole thing is an 18th century concept called the Cantillon effect. Named after economist Richard Cantillon, this theory states that when new money enters an economy, the flow path of that money matters tremendously. The people closest to the source of the new money benefit the very most, while those furthest away suffer. So how exactly does this work in our modern context? Well, when a central bank essentially prints new money, it enters the economy through massive financial institutions and corporations. These early recipients use that fresh capital to buy up assets, things like real estate and stocks, before the prices actually rise. By the time that money finally trickles down to the everyday worker, the prices of goods, services, and assets have all already gone up. The asset holders are fully insulated and enriched, while the middle class is purely penalized by the resulting inflation. Section 5. The shadow debt danger. So how exactly is the squeezed middle class surviving all of this intense macroeconomic pressure today? Well, the answer is debt. A report by the OECD reveals a pretty harsh reality. 1 in 5, that is 20% of middle-income households, are currently spending more than they actually bring in. Their financial inflows simply cannot sustain their basic outflows. Because of this constant deficit, the OECD notes that around 11% of middle-income households are heavily over-indebted. And again, this isn't driven by luxury purchases or reckless spending. It is largely driven by the sheer inability to keep up with the soaring, required costs of housing, medical care, and education that we discussed earlier. To manage this terrifying shortfall, consumers are turning to modern credit instruments like BNPL, or Buy Now, Pay Later. As outlined by Northridge Community Credit Union, options like this have absolutely exploded. On the surface, the pros are appealing. Interest-free options, no immediate hard credit pull. But the cons act as a very dangerous relief valve. It is incredibly easy to overspend, leading to what financial experts are now calling shadow debt. This is invisible debt that just quietly accumulates in the background across multiple apps, eating up your future cash flow while masking the true severity of your financial situation until those high late fees or defaults ultimately hit. So, let's pull all of this together to summarize exactly what we've learned in this explainer. The modern squeeze is defined by 5 massive forces. Your wages have decoupled from the actual productivity you provide. Meanwhile, housing and fixed costs have soared far past the rate of inflation. Because of this, it now takes 2 incomes just to survive, wiping out your discretionary cash. On top of that, the whole system is fundamentally weighted so that capital returns will always outpace wage growth. And finally, the daily shortfalls you're experiencing are just being temporarily masked by a dangerous accumulation of shadow debt. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Next time you look at your bank account and feel that familiar knot of anxiety, I want you to ask yourself, what if your financial reality isn't a personal failure, but a systemic feature? The data we've explored today shows that the rules of the game have shifted dramatically. Understanding how these macroeconomic forces operate is the absolutely vital first step to navigating them. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this gives you a clearer perspective on the reality of our modern economy.